Okay, welcome everybody. For early attendees, we're just going to give it a couple of minutes to start, and maybe like two full minutes, and then we'll kick off and start the webinar. Anna, can you see this little green and red bar at the bottom or not? Or is it just the main screen?
It's just the main screen.
Good.
All good to go.
Okay. I think we are just about to launch. So yeah, I think we can start now. Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your, I'm sure, very busy days to spend some time with us today. Today we're going to talk about hitting the beauty mark and how to elevate your beauty brand. And as you may know, I'm accompanied by two fabulous people. So just to first of all introduce myself, my name is Barney Willis. I'm responsible for all things beauty coming out of the European zone within Pattern. My background is I'm used to helping companies launch and grow marketplaces globally. So I've led the commercial organizations for marketplace integration businesses for most of my career. So that would be the likes of Channel Advisor. I've also worked for Marketplace Zalando before, and then most recently I also worked for THG, who are the owners of Look Fantastic and Cult Beauty. And I'm also delighted to be joined by the wonderful Wizz Selvey, who is founder and strategy advisor of her company Wizz & Co, which is a great company. It helps innovative brands stand out, scale and grow. So Wizz, just a quick introduction from you.
Hi, great to meet you all. My name's Wiz. I'm the founder of Wizz & Co. My background is 20 years in retail. I was head of beauty buying at Selfridges. I then was director of brands at retail brands at Soho House, Cowshed and Soho Home. And for the last 6 years, I've been working with major retailers and brands and also helping startup businesses through business coaching, working with companies such as Unilever, Logica, Staccato, and over 100 brand founders.
Fabulous. All right. And then also, of course, last but not least, I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Anna Koschitzke. She is Director of Advertising at Pattern Europe, which represents all of our marketing and tech and expertise in the company for our European-based brands. Anna?
Thank you. You've basically said all there is to say, but great to meet you all. Looking forward to having a discussion with you today. As Barney's mentioned, I head up the advertising team at Pattern Europe, and my previous experience is both Amazon and retail media, but also extends to other digital channels across all types of verticals, including beauty. So I'm really excited to get stuck in with you today.
Fantastic. All right, so let's get started. So we're excited to discuss insights into unlocking the beauty industry opportunity on Amazon today. So our key vocal point will be focused on the European beauty industry, the importance of being impactful with your beauty branding, and then what beauty brands need to know and how Pattern can help. And then lastly, we're going to save time for some Q&A towards the end. So if you do have any questions that come up during the presentation, feel free to add them in the Q&A box in Zoom. There should be a little button found towards the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll dedicate some time at the end of the session to address those questions. And then also, of course, the webinar is going to be fully recorded. It's already being recorded, and we'll distribute this after, so you can refer to it along with this deck, and we'll leave contact details for you to speak to each of us as well. So let's get started. So first and foremost, I wanted to just frame the beauty industry and some of the sort of dynamic growth within the beauty sector in Europe. So it won't come as much of a surprise to many here, but we've seen the rapid rise of consumer prioritization of self-care and emphasis on personal appearance. So in the UK, it's the fastest growing segment, and the story is very similar across mainland Europe. So you can see from this chart, there was definitely a pandemic-related boost in e-commerce sales, which reverted back to growth and trend in 22 and 23. So we fully expect this to continue to the tune of around 29 billion in sales this year. And to add to this, a total growth of 40% in the next 4 years to 2030. So we're not going to see any kind of slowdown at all there. And a lot of the key factors are impacting this category of beauty and fueling the growth. So one is the changing grooming habits. So beauty used to be more of like an occasional luxury, but now it's becoming much more of an integral element of daily routines, especially amongst millennials. So we've seen this big shift towards more eco-conscious routines where people are choosing natural, non-toxic organic ingredients. And this is reflecting that sort of broader movement towards sustainability that I'm sure most people are very familiar with. Another thing which I think is important to highlight is the social media influence. So we've seen explosive growth, especially on Instagram and TikTok, and this is transforming the way beauty is being marketed and perceived. We've certainly seen that within Pattern as well. So we're a part of TikTok Shop here, and we're seeing some amazing stats coming out of some of these social media channels. And obviously the personal engagement is obviously really encouraged with that amongst consumers. Another area is diversified distribution channels. So we've seen much more availability and accessibility, and this has been very much a sort of revolutionary sort of aspect as well. So you have the sort of specialist stores, the D2C, the online retailers, and the marketplaces, and they all offer an array of great options and super convenient ways for consumers to engage and maintain this great trend that we're seeing. And then finally, last but not least, it's worth mentioning the millennial and Gen Z impact. So they have the purchase power, the very super strong sort of demographic as well. So that's definitely having a big impact as well. So you can see from this statistic chart on the right that e-commerce still remains the strongest growth channel with the largest share of the market. We don't see that changing as younger demographics, more online oriented consumers continue to seek that convenience and choice and value as well in greater prominence, especially within the beauty category. So all of this accessibility and availability is great, but how are all of the subcategories lining up to support this explosion in growth? Well, we see personal care as the largest, as the largest amongst the different sort of subcategories. That being, to define that would be like toiletries, followed by maybe skincare after that. But where do these consumers go to shop? So if we look at e-commerce as the largest and fastest growing segment, and within that marketplaces are the place for convenience, value and choice, how important is embracing marketplaces specifically? Well, we think this is interesting because the beauty sector, most brands fall into two kind of tribes. They either love and embrace the marketplaces, and these tend to be more your sort of digitally native, newer brands, or they see marketplaces. If you think about those bigger, older, more established beauty groups and beauty brands, a lot of those groups tend to see it as almost like a necessary evil, as they know a proportion of their sales are there, and they're sort of almost reluctantly or belligerently they need to ensure that they're adequately represented because they're seeing that it's having an impact on the wider ecosystem, retail ecosystem. So it's important to embrace marketplaces, as candidly, if you don't, the bigger you become, the more your products are going to appear on marketplaces like Amazon anyway. So this is something that we really sermonize at Pattern. And the more 3P sellers that appear on Amazon, the more control you potentially lose. And I've got a great personal example of this. I've been in the company about 6 months. And in my first week, I won't mention them on this call, but I met up with a very large beauty group, very large and well-established beauty group, global beauty group. And they're a classic example of someone who saw themselves as a little bit too highbrow for Amazon, perhaps, and they failed to embrace the channel properly until they came to us in December last year. And they had no idea how much of their products were being sold. So we hold the biggest data lake on beauty brands on Amazon, outside of Amazon itself. So we could see how much was being sold on there, first of all. So we found it was actually about 500 million of their products were being sold, but this was actually across 42,000 sellers. Which, as you can imagine, that's potentially 42,000 messages about this company's brand from all sorts of illegal sellers. So it's effectively chaos. So you can't let your brand lose control of this. If you're a successful brand and you're growing, ultimately your brand is going to end up on Amazon at some point. Someone's going to get hold of your product, and ultimately that's going to erode the value of brand. And ultimately, if you fail to embrace Amazon, you get this chaos where you've got 42,000 sellers selling your products online, and it's just carnage. So we can, of course, as a business, is one of the first things we do. We can, of course, fix this for them. It'll take a while because there's a lot of sellers there, but you can imagine how much damage is done to the brand. So marketplaces need to be very, very fundamental. It's the first thing we say. It has to be absolutely fundamental, not only because this is where the consumer is increasingly shopping and doing their product discovery and product awareness, but also because it controls the entire retail ecosystem and how your brand is ultimately represented. And to summarize here, the trend here, from an EU perspective, marketplaces are projected to continue to surge to around 530 billion this year. So in 2024, it's super critical you're in the camp that fully embraces marketplaces, given the 40% trend growth to 900 billion to a trillion by 2030 in Europe. It's super important that you embrace it. And there are several global marketplaces, so it can be super daunting to try and navigate them all. We get that completely. But of the 30 largest, Pattern actually operates in about 29 of them. Our marketplace footprint is directly correlated to where the consumer is and also what our brand footprint is actually looking for. So we actually operate in 29 out of the 30 currently. But Amazon is absolutely vital to embrace in the UK and the US because it's such a dominant marketplace. But in some other territories, obviously, it's worth mentioning, the dominant channel is very, very local to that particular territory. So a great example of that, for example, would be in the Netherlands. It's all about a marketplace called Bol. If you're in Poland, it's all about Allegro. If you're in China, it's all about Tmall, for example. If you're a fashion brand, then it's Zalando in Europe. So we ensure we're selling where the consumer is looking, and that isn't always category specific. One of the largest sales, some of the largest sales actually happen on the more generic channels like Amazon or eBay. And a lot of companies will go, no, I want to be on a beauty channel because I'm specifically looking for that kind of beauty audience. But they actually overlook the fact that there's far more traffic and far more sales being made on potentially like a generic channel like Amazon, as opposed to a outwardly in vogue beauty channel with far less traffic and organic opportunity. And so this slide is actually just our current marketplace footprint, but really the world's largest seller of beauty products is Amazon currently. And there is no restriction to us selling on any other channel outside of this mix. So it really reflects the demand we see on these channels for our existing brand partners across all categories. But trying to sell across all these channels, even with a large, relatively experienced bunch of experts, is pretty intimidating, let alone trying to do it yourself. So there's a very high degree of specialization, localization, the need to find the right partners with the right technology, and a small army of people in each territory in order to scale competitively. So this is something that we bring to the table as a business. But first and foremost, I think probably sensibly, let's switch over to my colleague Anna just to talk about very highlight on how we sort of drive traffic and what our approach and what sort of tech we can bring to the table to help these brands. Over to you, Anna.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So like Barney's just alluded to, we'll be focusing on Amazon for this part of the webinar because otherwise we could probably be here for days, but hopefully Amazon will cover quite a lot of ground for a lot of you. So as I'm sure many of you have heard before as well, but Amazon is obviously a very powerful search tool for consumers. And actually in 2023, 50% of consumers turned to Amazon to actually even begin their research process when they want to consider a beauty product, which I guess is quite interesting because I suppose historically Amazon has been considered more of a bottom of the funnel, you know, someone already knows exactly what they want type of channel, but actually it's very much shifting from consumers in that they're starting and ending their journeys on Amazon. So within the beauty category specifically, on top of that, about 70% of beauty shoppers are discovering their new products or their new favorite brand through advertising on platform as well, and 30% of that is currently looking at influencers. Of course, influencers are and can be an effective tactic for building that brand awareness and credibility, though it may just not be the most efficient way to drive product discovery through Amazon to then essentially help you to grow your business. So we'll be focusing a little bit more on the advertising aspect for the time being. So moving on to that, looking at I guess the beauty category, kind of as I've alluded to already, it's actually shown that within customers that are starting and carrying on their journey through Amazon, where they're considering any beauty products or brands, it actually turns out that the majority of purchases aren't fully planned. There is a small minority of consumers who are just fully impulsive and are just randomly making purchases, but 45% of beauty purchases actually fall into the semi-planned category. So that means that shoppers have a general idea of the type of product that they need, such as maybe a facial serum, but they haven't really decided yet on a specific brand or product even within that. So by making your product and your brand discoverable and appealing to the semi-planned shoppers, that's really where the core opportunity sits. And it's actually a pretty big piece of the pie, which is really exciting because it means that you're really able to go after that new incremental consumer that you may have not had any touch points with before. So let's look into the landscape of that a little bit more. Thank you. So the problem we know is that the search results for a beauty shopper, based on also all of the trends and the uptick in demand that Barney has already alluded to, has actually also resulted on, I guess, many brands now coming onto Amazon and wanting to represent their brands and their products on this platform because of all of the things that we've mentioned before. So in this instance, I've just outlined an example of a vitamin C facial serum. And as you can see by some of the placements already, actually the majority of the top search placements are occupied by sponsored ads, so paid for placements, not organic listings, which is a common misconception. So in fact, the entire first screen of results, as you're kind of seeing here, is dominated by various ad formats. So one of them being the sponsored brand ad format, which is the banner style format you're seeing at the top. Followed by a sponsored product carousel in the middle, and actually another one later on. So actually that means that when shoppers are searching for popular beauty keywords, they are actually highly likely to engage with an advertised for format, hence also the 70% that I mentioned before. And actually that's even exacerbated on mobile devices because the screen is smaller. So if already all of these placements on a desktop example are mostly sponsored, that means then on mobile, you know, that's even stronger until I guess mobile phones get even bigger than they are today already. So actually what we're able to do or looking to do is leveraging a combination of ad types, but doing that strategically to help you win on the search page and ensure that you're showing customers your products at the right time for those customers who you think you can sway towards making that purchase. So when thinking about what kind of ad products you're looking to use, there are actually quite a few available, some of which I've outlined here, and I'll just talk you through some of those. So they all serve a different purpose, which is great news. The most frequently used one is the sponsored product ad type, and actually that's the one that Amazon first started out with. So it's the most established ad type, and it's the one that also looks, I would say, the most native. It's actually pretty difficult to the untrained eye to be able to decipher if it's a paid for or an organic placement. So off the back of that as well, if a customer feels like they're just browsing and they're not, you know, blatantly being advertised to, sometimes actually has resulted in the fact that customers do tend to click on this ad type the most. And because of the style of the ad type, because it looks very native, it's got all of the product information in there already before customers even clicking through to the product detail page. By the time that they do land, you've hopefully driven a more qualified customer to the PDP and are able to convert them better. That being said, with it being the core, I suppose, traffic and conversion driving ad format, Amazon has invested a lot over time into different styles of ad formats, also, I guess, playing a bit more into the fact that customers are also starting their journey on Amazon. So to facilitate that, to, I guess, facilitate the discovery element, Amazon have invested heavily in more creative ad types, and that includes, for instance, the sponsored brand ad type that I've spoken to before. So this comes in the form of the banner, which actually highlights not just one product like you can see from the sponsored product ad type, but you actually are able to showcase a range and a variety of your products, which is really great when customers are searching a bit more broadly, when maybe they, again, want a facial serum. If you have several in your range, it actually gives you an amazing opportunity to showcase multiple products in that range at once, which again, hopefully should increase the probability and likelihood that you're able to convert a customer and engage them rather than losing out to a competitor. On top of that, you're able to also now start adding some creatives just to give a bit more of a branded feel and to make a customer more familiar with your brand and what you stand for. Maybe also able to even call out some of the USPs and appealing to the consumers as per Barney's points earlier in terms of what customers care about these days. Not only that, though, there are also now many more, I guess, creative, non-static ad formats, which also include video ads. Amazon have opened up many ad slots for the video creative, because what Amazon have seen, not just in the beauty category, but actually in every category, is that video content is very engaging. And I'm pretty sure that that's not just the case for Amazon, but is very common for other channels as well, because it really gives you the chance to explain the product a little bit more, and again, hopefully should lead to a more qualified click and hopefully increase that chance of conversion. But video is a really, really great way to explain perhaps a more complicated product, or where you really feel like the consumer requires a bit more explanation, or just gives you the time to shine, I suppose, and call out those key USPs that you would like to for your product. On top of that as well, you do also have the ability to leverage programmatic display ads through Amazon's DSP. So there's one just on the left-hand side there, but the programmatic element is a really great addition to the sponsored ads suite, because it allows you to not just target customers that you have been in touch with before, so you are able to do some remarketing there, but you're also able to target customers based on their demographics, their lifestyles, their hobbies. Essentially, any marketing personas that you might have in-house, you're able to translate onto the DSP and are able to target a certain customer profile, again, to tap into that 45% of customers that are maybe browsing but aren't, familiar with your brand yet. So plenty of opportunity there. So with all of that in mind, because it is quite a lot of placements, you could spend a lot of money and a lot of time trying to purchase all of those ad slots, but realistically, no one can afford to own every one of those placements, nor should you need to for every search result. And it's really about, I guess, the art of picking the right product at the right time with the right type of ad format, to make sure that you're, I guess, increasing that chance of conversion and really grabbing those customers when they're ready to make that purchase. So with that in mind, just to give a bit of insight into the shopper journey, that typically begins with a bit of initial product research and browsing, which is, I guess, when you may choose to go for the more kind of creative and dynamic ad types to make that introduction. And once the consideration is happening and is ongoing, then the shopper tends to take around 2 to 3 days to browse a little bit more, go a bit deeper. So maybe that's when the sponsored product style ad format becomes quite interesting, with the extra product information, just to really cement the product in the consideration set of the customer. Then after that, the shopper is highly likely to make a purchase decision, hopefully. And this is where something like programmatic display can come in really handy. So all of that work that you've done before in terms of driving awareness and consideration, if they haven't already purchased, which obviously is the ideal scenario, that you can then make that impulse purchase, you can then maybe leverage some retargeting tactics to really bring that customer back and make sure that they do make that purchase. With that being said, obviously, you don't need to advertise everything everywhere all the time, because that is impossible. What has been shown and what our data has shown using Amazon's Marketing Cloud is that it is typically more effective to leverage a certain combination of ad formats together. I guess something like I've just alluded to, that you might start with some dynamic content, then moving to some more static across different platforms with all the different type of targeting available as well. But what we've really seen is that it's been really effective to start with a sponsored product ad, then moving to kind of that sponsored brand ad if it's a more kind of generic and broad search, and then retargeting the customer with a programmatic display ad, because by that point you've built that brand and product recall, and then using that final touch point should help to bring that customer across the line. But all of that to say is that it's really worth looking at how your different ad formats work together and leveraging Amazon's Marketing Cloud where you can, to really understand how you can most efficiently guide a customer through the journey, and you don't lose them halfway through, since there is so much competition happening all the time, as I'm sure you're aware. I think with that being said, back over to you, Barney.
Fab. So yeah, let's just quickly talk about our approach on this. And so the first thing is probably worth saying is we need to look at this subject of control. It's definitely something which feels even more important in the beauty sector than any other sector that certainly I've seen when it comes to Amazon. So we like to talk about the subject of control first, and avoiding what we call the profitability death spiral that you see here. And the reason why the profitability death spiral exists is because of the good intentions of e-com directors. They often adopt the approach of revenue at all costs. And it's what many e-commerce brand leaders are sort of brought up to eat, sleep, and breathe when they're attempting to grow their business. So historically, it was a strategy, I think, which brands use to gauge their success. But in today's world of omni-channel e-commerce, however, revenue at all cost will actually end up stopping your brand's growth dead in its tracks. So a revenue-first approach can be great for short-term revenue goals in summary, but it's not good when you think about long-term profitability. And this is what we're pattern are often brought in to solve. So you remember that example I said earlier on about 42,000 sellers? That's a great example of when it just gets completely out of control and it's completely Wild West. So it's one of the biggest mistakes that we see as sales leaders make when they're trying to grow their e-commerce business. And it can lead to all of those unauthorized sellers seizing control of your brand, and left unchecked can get you into this death spiral. So what is the profitability death spiral? So it's quite self-explanatory on this slide, but as the name suggests, it's where your brand growth and revenue go to die. So it sounds dramatic, but when the brand business gets caught in it, the spiral can really eat up your profits, and it can set your e-commerce brand back just as you're about to spring forward. So that's why we like to make you very aware as the first sort of thing that we try to book when we start engaging with a potential partner or pattern. And there are 3 steps that lead to your brand straight into the profitability death spiral. So you've got wide distribution. So think of those 42,000 sellers. The vast majority of that will have started with a distribution network of retailers and wholesale and distribution partners, who then pass on to the next person and the next person, next person. And you've got all these mom and pop shops and one-man bands that end up selling your product online. Price erosion from online retailers. So one of the things that Amazon do is they're constantly checking the internet to find the cheapest version of your particular product, and they will then drop their price to match that. If they're not able to drop your price to match it, as in you're not 1p, you haven't sold to Amazon, what they'll do is, if they know that elsewhere that product is being sold cheaper, then they'll effectively suppress you. So what that means is they'll add friction to the sale by basically obfuscating your particular listing amongst a load of other sellers that are actually selling it. So what happens is it gets quite hard. You have to keep doing this action. What I mean is, on Amazon page, you have to scroll down the right to actually find that particular seller, because Amazon believe that Amazon is a very consumer-focused marketplace, and that's often to the detriment of the seller. And what that means is they perceive you as creating a poorer experience because you're not the cheapest. Effectively, that's what it comes down to. And ultimately, that will lead to price erosion from online retailers, because the retailers then see Amazon, and they're obviously they have to try and match in order to be competitive. And ultimately, the person that loses in this equation isn't the consumer, isn't Amazon, it's actually the brand itself. So you see profit erosion across all of your channels. So very important that you regain that control and you command the narrative rather than allowing all these other mom and pop shops to take control. And the way that we do that, we regain that control in the first place, is we actually partner with a business who are the biggest e-control business globally. There's different legislative means of getting around these challenges, but in Europe specifically, it's a piece of legislation called VBER. VBER stands for Vertical Block Exemption Regulation. And what that allows you to do is to nominate one seller on the marketplace to represent a particular ASIN or your brand in entirety. When you have that, then you can then work with this legal company, which we work with, and they can either have those friendly conversations with those sellers if they're, you're friendly to them and their retailers help them understand. But the important thing is you have the legal clout of them being able to enforce and effectively remove these sellers if you need to. And certainly the other grey sellers or unauthorized sellers, which you don't know of and don't approve of, who are damaging your brand, you can very quickly remove them. And then once you have that control, and you're able to win the buy box, which is the little buy button, which is completely frictionless and very easy to work with, then you're able to bring in all that amazing technology and the experience and expertise that Anna's been talking about in order to ensure that you grow your brand in the way that you'd like to grow it. So that's the first thing. And then secondly, what I wanted to show you very quickly, once you have that control, this slide is something that I think is basically, this is an offer. We can do this for any brand out there. So if you would like to see how you look on Amazon and how you're appealing to a consumer, we create something which we call the Marketplace Scorecard. And we can do any of these Marketplace Scorecards for free for anyone listening. So just write to me afterwards and I'll do that for you within a day or two. But what this is basically we hold huge amounts of data on every brand that's out there. And if I was to share with you the enormous spreadsheets that we store all this data on, it would be, it'd be very, very confusing and wouldn't tell you much. So what we try to do is we precipitate all that data into this infographic, which we have here, which is called the scorecard. And what that does is that showcases in a very easy to understand format exactly how you're performing across the e-commerce, the standard e-commerce equation, which is traffic, conversion, and price. And then we break down each of those different parts of the equation to a number of different attributes. And then we use our data and our technology to algorithmically give you a score. So this isn't me going, yeah, you got about a 6 out of 10 for non-branded traffic. This is something which is actually done by the algorithm to give you a score out of 10. And then we create that blended average, which we see here at 7.8. So you can see high level, we can see that non-branded traffic, for example, they're scoring poorly on, which given that most people are coming to Amazon, and if they're looking for example, a face serum, they'll type in face serum rather than the particular brand name. That's happening way more than you actually have for sort of branded searches typically on Amazon. And they also have poor SEO, so if they have poor ratings and review score, for example, are they responding to quickly to inquiries, for example, that could be impacting that. Within Pattern, we have a customer service team who respond no more than 16 seconds, for example. So again, it's an area where we're able to say, okay, if we can get you up to north of 9.5, which is always a target with every partner that we have on here, and we can get you really accurate product pages to book the trend there, and we can sort out your poor delivery. We can remove all those bad sellers that are, that are effectively damaging your brand. If all these different things can be avoided, then effectively we'll be able to have almost like a playbook for making you successful, which will then manifest in what e-com directors really should be looking for, which is improvements in revenue, yes, but also improvements in margin. Removing that sort of death spiral effect around your brand equity and your pricing and everything else. And then ultimately, reducing your ad spend with the ultimate goal of creating a sustainable high growth business, which actually also is very well protected and is following the plan that you have as the brand, as the e-com director or as the brand owner. So as I say, if anybody wants this and we can showcase exactly how you're doing, I'm more than happy to set one of those up for you. So just maybe on the ad tech side of things, it's a good point to bring Anna back in quickly just to talk about how our ad tech can help.
Yes, absolutely. So leading on from what Barney's just mentioned around the profitability element, that's really something that our team has a heavy focus on. And as a team and as a company, we very much have the philosophy that every product has its own destiny on a marketplace, and in this instance, again, Amazon. So if it has a right to win by, I guess, with the philosophy of showing the right customer, the right product at the right time, by focusing on the right keywords for growth, we can actually ensure that we, boost our organic rank and organic share as well, rather than just simply paying out to beat competitors for the entirety of the product's life cycle, because that realistically is not going to be something that's very sustainable for the brand. So in this example, quickly, we're just going to look at what this product's destiny could look like. So the first thing that we always consider also as an advertising team is how retail ready the product is, because we want to make sure for our partners that we only put a product in front of the customer that is ready to purchase and has, I guess, the best chance of converting. So that means that the price is right, we have good ratings and reviews on the product, and we have a healthy amount of keywords on the first page, because we simply cannot pay our way to the top. That's not how the algorithm works. So looking at the score of this product alone, it looks like it has some potential, but we really need a little bit more than that. So we want to understand how this product stacks up against others in its category and any direct competitors, and actually understanding if putting traffic investment on this product will help it to achieve additional growth, or whether we would just be wasting the advertising budget and actually it would be invested better elsewhere. So to do that, we use something which we have which is our digital shelf tool. So digital shelf analyzes a selected product that we've just looked at, for instance, compared to similar products based on their core similarities by scraping the PDPs and matching them against each other, and also the search frequency on Amazon. So in this first graph, you can slightly see, I suppose, I'm not sure how big your screens are, you can see the product against its competitors. So on the y-axis here, we have the product search frequency first of all, which essentially just means how often a customer searches for keywords relevant to that product. And then on the x-axis, we have the similarity in rank changes, or how closely the product's ranking correlates with our selected product over time. So you really get a good understanding in terms of where your product specifically sits within others in a similar space, to make it simple. So in this scenario, we have quite a good situation, I would say, in that it looks like we have actually not that many or the majority of products in the upper right quadrant, which is the sweet spot for us to understand how many competitors are quite similar to us and are also highly searched for. So once we've understood that, we're actually able to, first of all, even understand who our key competitors are rather than just making assumptions. And off the back of that as well, we are able to use the tool to actually give us an output in terms of the most relevant keywords that are related to the products and higher ranking. And the digital shelf tool will give us an output to actually help us to understand if we're likely to even win on a certain organic keyword, because that can then indicate, do we need to make maybe content changes? Is the product, actually not relevant to the term, which then for the advertising team would help us to understand if we should actually put additional focus on that product for those kind of keywords, or if we should be looking elsewhere. So just to summarize, the digital shelf helps us to understand who our competitors are, how crowded the space is, helps us to identify exactly which products we're likely to win against that we should bid on potentially, and also gives us a good understanding of which kind of organic keywords are, first of all, the most important to win on, and how likely we are to win on them. And having actually talked quite a lot about organic, I suppose, I just wanted to give a little bit of an insight into why organic is so important. So looking at this data, organic rank is absolutely critical for success on Amazon. Like I've said before, you can't just pay your way to the top, nor is it sustainable. So that is never our aim to work with our partners on. So as you can see here, a full 80% of clicks happen on the very first page of the search results, which if you've done any browsing yourself, hopefully that stacks up as well. So if your products aren't ranking on page 1, which is why I've emphasized it a little bit, you're missing out on actually the vast majority of potential traffic and sales that are out there. But actually, there's more to it than just page 1. If we consider that 6% of them clicks go to just the top 3 ranked products of a search term, which if you remember some of the screenshots that we saw earlier, there is so much going on, and it just shows how focused a customer's attention is. So really getting to that top placement is super important. So making sure that we're able to position ourselves at the right time, and therefore actually even identifying which really are the critical keywords and products we should bid on is super critical to success. And then number 1 spot, even to kind of take a little bit further, I suppose, 35% of clicks are going to that product. So it is us trying to get to the top, but not just by brute force of the advertising alone, but actually by working with building organic rank as well. So our philosophy is that kind of looking at this graph as you move from left to right, you can see that a trend emerges if you look at the organic rank side of things. So as a product climbs the organic rank from the bottom of page 1 all the way to the top, as we've alluded to, that's kind of what our strategy tends to be. The required ad spend actually to maintain that position steadily decreases. So we're very much using advertising as an incremental tool to help build and accelerate the flywheel to help us to get that organic position, so that over time, actually, hopefully your advertising costs should decrease, which is maybe something that I'm not sure or maybe is commonly mentioned, but that is very much our aim, that we use advertising as an accelerating tool rather than just a brute force to push a product to the top. So what we've covered so far in the last few slides is actually available only through Pattern's patented deck, Destiny, to help you increase your organic revenue and accelerate your advertising as well. But having said all the things that we've talked about before, maybe just to summarize a couple of points that you can take away regardless of whether you're partnered with us or not. So first of all is that Amazon advertising on Amazon is the best way to get in front of the beauty shoppers, thinking back to the kind of 70% of searches that kind of happen through advertising on Amazon alone, and actually just in principle 50% of shoppers starting their journey on Amazon. Most purchases in the category are semi-planned, so there's a huge opportunity to actually convince new customers to make that purchase in that first, introduction to your brand. So that's yours to influence through some of the ad types that we've mentioned before. So leveraging a strategic combination of those ad types that we've mentioned before is a great way to do that. And focusing on non-branded queries also, as Barney has alluded to, is the best way to capture new consumers rather than just working on brand defense. And finally, advertising on these queries and monitoring organic rank in combination simultaneously is really key to driving that incremental long-term growth.
Thank you, Anna. That was ace. So I think it's a really great opportunity to bring in our guest speaker as well, Wizz. Myself and Anna have hogged all the airtime, but I hope you all found that super useful. So just want to open up to maybe just ask some questions now. Just to, maybe to start with you, Wizz, what just from your side of things with the business that you run, how do you feel that your beauty brand can stand out in the e-commerce space? How would you say?
I think there's a number of different factors, and I think the key thing is the strength of the brand outside of the platforms that they're on, and whether that is through Amazon, it's through their own D2C channels, or it's through retailers. It's how do you build up that brand presence and that impact and that hype for a brand, which is absolutely crucial for people going onto platforms, searching for it, whether it's a direct search or it's semi-planned. So there's a number of different factors. Is how is that brand aligning to market trends? What's happening with customer behavior? And how does the brand align to what their needs are? I mean, I talk a lot about consumer trends because they really impact, I suppose, the rise and fall of brands. And over my many years of working in industry as a buyer in retail, and also kind of working with brands and helping them to scale, that's kind of really the sweet spot, is how your brand aligns with those market trends. And that can be a younger brand that's suddenly catapulted into kind of huge success over the years, or it's a very established brand that can sometimes start to lose market share because there's a lot of other brands out there that are popping up. And I suppose that relevance to what the consumer wants gets lost, or the customer kind of forgets why that brand started and kind of what their USP and point of difference is. So I think it's really about how that brand creates an emotive connection with a customer, and ultimately how it's solving a problem for the consumer. And that's what we're seeing a lot in the beauty category at the moment. There's either that emotional connection, that kind of want, need, desire, certainly with luxury beauty, but we're seeing that seep into mass as well, and kind of personal care. Beauty becomes very emotive, and even whether that's using basic soap or in your bathroom, or kind of when you're having a shower, people are really thinking about kind of, I suppose, those moments of kind of pleasure that they can find from a beauty ritual, whatever the price point. So that point of difference is really key. And then that hype that really drives customers to purchase a brand. So all of a sudden, we've all known those brands where we're like, I keep seeing this brand everywhere. It's just everyone's talking about it. I keep seeing it on social media, in front of influencers, in the press. I keep seeing it in shops. So it's those multiple different touch points where suddenly a brand pops, and you think it's only just appeared, but actually there's been a lot of groundwork in the background of building that hype, marketing the brand, building the sales. But all of a sudden there's, I suppose, that halo effect where everything compounds, and it's seen everywhere. So I think also that's a really kind of crucial point to be thinking about your distribution strategy, because are people then suddenly going to search on Amazon, for example, and either it's not there with a great presence, or it's lots of other resellers there. So how is your brand presented? Because that consistency is really key to maintain that brand equity. Yeah,
brilliant. It's like that a classic overnight success thing, but actually they don't realize there's been, loads and loads of graft before that.
Exactly.
So no, really get that. What would be, I think, the interesting, I mean, you're obviously, super experienced in the beauty industry. Can you give me maybe some examples of really successful beauty branding, some specific names?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of jump to mind. I mean, Augustus Bader is obviously kind of on the more luxury end in skincare, and has kind of really created a very strong positioning for themselves in the market. It's obviously a much higher price point than a lot of other skincare brands. So I suppose some of the key things that they're doing is really coming with expertise, with that kind of like really science-led background within skincare, and kind of solving a problem for customers. And they have got a really, I suppose, position themselves with a kind of a premium distribution strategy as well, from kind of their, I suppose, e-commerce experience, but also to the retailers that they stock, that they're stocked with. So they're quite selective about who they're stocked with, again, which really helps to maintain control of the brand as they're kind of building a multi-channel approach. And again, there's that challenge of what's the right timing for these brands to kind of really elevate what's happening on marketplaces, because when they were quite young, there probably wasn't necessarily the need, but once they get to a certain revenue point, they need to be looking at that and getting ahead of the game. And then another one, I suppose, to compare it to that's at the lower end of the price point is the Inky list. That's been around for a number of years now, but it's continuing to scale at rapid growth. They've got very strong retail presence and have really expanded their Amazon presence as well. It's at the lower end of the price point, but it's still a really aspirational brand. And their branding is very strong. Again, their distribution strategy is quite broad, but it's also quite tight in its own way. They're really considered about who they stock their brands with, stock the brand with. So yeah, kind of, I suppose it's also aligning really to that point of difference and what the consumers want. They want those science-based products, but they don't necessarily always have the budget or want to spend on a high price point like something like Augustus Badair. So there is a kind of a price point for everyone. And I think we've really seen a big trend, certainly kind of over the pandemic and the kind of cost of living crisis, is actually it's those middle brands and that middle price point that really falls away. Lots of people continue to purchase at a higher level or want to buy less and really invest, or people trade down and buy something that's more affordable for them. So it's kind of at this kind of point in time in any kind of I suppose recession, is often those middle brands can get a bit lost. So I think they're two good examples that at either end of the spectrum.
Yeah, and beauty is one of the, they say that that it's like recession proof, right? There's always someone will always find money for lipstick. I think it's a lipstick effect or something they call it, don't they? But yeah, what would you, so where do brands go wrong in your opinion? I'm not going to ask you to cite specific names of brands that have gone wrong, but where do you think, in your experience, brands typically tend to trip up and they come to you, wounded and looking for help? What sort of things do you see?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. It's their positioning in the market. When there's a lot of new, it's easier than ever to bring a brand to market, and it certainly has been over the last 5 years. But it's suddenly got harder than ever to scale a brand. The cost of customer acquisition has gone through the roof compared to it was 4 years ago on digital. So some of that digital boom has definitely slowed and been much more challenging, and a lot more brands are now looking to retail partners to help them scale and get that visibility. But ultimately, it's that positioning with the consumer. So how do you create that emotive connection with them, particularly when there's a lot of brands that kind of can quickly scale through TikTok, for example. Some of those legacy brands kind of get left behind because they think either the consumers have forgotten their point of difference, or indeed the brand has forgotten really kind of what their core values are and how they bring that to the forefront with the customers. So I suppose that's the key thing, which is around positioning, which can be a brand of any size as well. I think you can sometimes kind of get diluted as a brand scales and more people enter the team, or there's changes in leadership as well. And then also distribution strategies. It can become oversaturated. Again, as you were saying earlier on, is about that thinking that actually more distribution points and just going for sales over profit or brand equity can be really damaging to a brand. And having worked in kind of premium and mass retail for many years, I do think that having a very focused retail strategy is really key. And you look at a brand like Charlotte Tilbury, which when I was head of beauty buying at Selfridges, we launched exclusively. They've kept their distribution really strategic. So they've gone with kind of key retailers and made sure then that I suppose they're not competing. The retailers aren't competing with each other for that business. So they've been strategic in every market that they've gone into, and obviously been one of the fastest growing beauty brands out there. But a lot of people can chase after different distribution channels at the detriment of making each one the most profitable. And again, that goes back down to price as well. If you're constantly competing on price all the time, which is one of the challenges with all the resellers on Amazon, but it's also one of the challenges of being with lots of online retailers as well. You can start to lose control of your pricing and ultimately your profit because you're constantly competing with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so again, it's obsession over revenue and profit rather than actually remembering what your your point of differentiation and how you're creating real value for your consumer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk as well, just very quickly, about TikTok. We've seen some amazing results with TikTok, and obviously, it's the biggest category for TikTok is the beauty category, followed by fashion, I believe. So it's a super interesting area. What are your when we think about building hype? A lot of brands are experimenting with TikTok at the moment. What are your thoughts on that generally, and how to actually implement that as part of a broader strategy? What have you seen there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting channel and you can see brands suddenly boom on it. It's definitely worth investing in because you can get organic growth as well, which is much harder to get in, I suppose, the more established platforms like Instagram. But it does take time and effort, and the content is different to what you want to serve on Instagram as well. So obviously it's video, but there's I suppose a lot more rough and ready. And it's sometimes can be difficult to predict what's going to go viral and what's not. But everyone, I suppose, is hoping for that one viral post. And I think it's definitely about the more you put in, the more you get out as well. But it's definitely something to experiment with. I think there's a big misconception that it's only the Gen Z customer, but it's not. There is a really broad range of customer there. I'm also personally got another business where I'm launching a brand for perimenopause, and TikTok's going to be a big focus for us. A lot of people also use it for a search engine as well. So particularly in beauty, people are searching for solutions, sometimes more than Google. So there is a broad range of demographic there as well. So I think it's definitely an opportunity that brands need to be considering and definitely not ignoring.
Yeah, and Anna, what would be your thoughts on TikTok? Obviously, being the advertising expert within Pattern, obviously, we would say that having strong buy box ownership is like number one. Obviously, since Amazon is very much where consumers start their product journey. But how do you see sort of TikTok operating with what we surmise within Pattern?
Certainly, I would say to be very careful about it. First and foremost, I would definitely say to focus on kind of the core elements, making sure that you have the content available to allow you, once you start to get the momentum, you don't then want to have that dropping because you've run out of content to engage people, because then really the advertising, it only really works if the content is there, because it is so focused on the creative. So I would say to make sure that your content strategy is really solid first. And then from an advertising side of things, again, TikTok is like very, very much like any other platform where you could spend millions probably every day if you wanted to. But I would say to focus on building a bottom-up strategy. So what that means is focusing on a smaller, I guess, customer pool first by really, really setting up tightly knit audiences that you want to target. So maybe starting with your marketing personas that you have already and trying to duplicate those on TikTok and building those personas that way, rather than going super broad, by targeting anyone, for instance, that's just interested in beauty, because realistically that won't get you engagement levels as high and conversion rates as high as well. So I would definitely say bottom up in the sense of starting with customers who you think might be interested in smaller groups, and then building up from there would be the general recommendation.
Okay, and then thank you, Anna. And then also maybe back to Wizz. What would, if you could sort of say one area to watch out for when it comes to like building your brand equity and exploding your brand and creating the hype and everything else? What would be your sort of one big tip that you would give to any aspiring brands out there that are looking to change the world?
I think consistency around your messaging and your point of difference. And how is that consistent across multiple touch points? Because I think as a brand, and when obviously people are working in a brand and leading teams, and I suppose that messaging point of view, you think that, I'm just saying the same thing over and over again. But consumers are so time poor, and we all know as human beings ourselves that we're constantly bombarded with information, with messages. Even if we go on Instagram or TikTok and we scroll for 10 minutes, we probably can't remember any of the somebody asked you 10 minutes later, what did you see? You probably can't remember. So you need that continuous I suppose messaging and communication around why your brand is different. What are your unique selling points? Because it's very hard for us all to retain information when we're constantly bombarded with it, whether it's through advertising, whether it's through social media, whether it's announcements and signs on the street, or it's the number of emails we're constantly getting on our phones and WhatsApps. So that consistency is really key around messaging. So you become a memorable brand, and people know why they should buy your brand and why it's going to personally help them. So I suppose that personalization is really key to, I suppose, helping people convert. So your brand stays top of mind. So when they do go to purchase it, that your brand is the one that they want to buy.
Fantastic. All right. So thank you, everybody. I'm just going to move us over to final questions. If there are any questions from anybody.
There is a question. I'm not sure if you can see it. Otherwise, I can.
Yeah, go ahead, Anna. You asked the question.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Nina, for asking questions. So the question is, does Pattern engage with startups, or are you working with established brands only? What tips do you have for startups who are discouraged from getting Amazon, given the cost and the likelihood of hitting page 1? So I guess there's a bit of a two-parter there. I don't know if you want to take the first part.
Yeah, so there's so yes, we do. I mean, we have a very unique model at Pattern. The sort of classic e-commerce support model would either be your sort of agency model, where we would, if we were an agency, we would potentially charge you a fee. They typically work on a sort of maybe a percentage of your GMV, your gross merchandise value, or some kind of retainer. And then that pays for the staff and the operations. That's a classic agency model. There are also aggregators out there who effectively have the same pricing model, but they provide some technology. The Pattern model is very different in that we actually generate the money to provide all the growth opportunity and the staff and the technology and everything else. We create that by actually physically buying your stock. So our model is very, very simple. We buy your stock, and then we sell your stock where you want us to sell your stock. So we will work with you to create the go-to-market strategy that you're looking for. And then we do absolutely everything else. So that is provide all of the staff, we'll do all the legal, we'll do all the compliance, we'll do all the packaging, all the fulfillment, everything effectively, like a distributor. But the big difference is that we're not a distributor, we're a marketplace accelerator. So it's very much like a partnership. So to your question around is the model are we able to sorry, Anna, give me the question again. I just lost my train of thought.
No, it's more if we're also able to engage with startups, or if it's established brands.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Yeah, so we can work with established brands because they have the sell-through. But the startups, it depends on how much sell-through you have, because we finance it by managing what you're doing currently, improving. So one of the things that we do when we manage a brand is we improve your revenue, so we improve your sales, we improve your profit margins, and we reduce your ad spend. So there's effectively no cost for advertising with us. We provide everything effectively for free because we actually acquired your stock. So we need to have enough sell-through to be able to pay for all of those services. So we have a threshold that we need to work with, which is typically we need to see that you're capable of generating at least 1 million on Amazon in a year in order for us to be able to work with you. So there are a lot of amazing startup brands which we're in conversations with, which we fully expect to get to that threshold. And once we're at that threshold, we can then manage your business, meaningfully improve your sales and all those other great attributes, and then effectively take you anywhere in the world that you want to go. So hopefully that answers the question.
I think that answers actually both parts of the question. I think there was also another question around, that was one for you, Wiz. I see that you're typing an answer to that, so I think we've got that one covered. There is 2 other questions. One of them is, I'm not on Amazon, but my products are. What would you suggest as next steps? And then maybe just to tag those 2 together, because it's probably quite easy to answer both in one go. And do you only work with beauty brands, or do you work in other categories as well? So again, probably 2 questions for you, Barney.
Yeah, so yes, we can work on any category. I mean, basically, we're not just about Amazon, by the way. We can work with any marketplaces anyway, but we have the best amount of data, and we're extremely close with Amazon. Amazon are massive fans of ours. So yes, we can work on any category as long as you're an Amazon seller. And then the first question, Anna. Okay.
First question was, I'm not on Amazon, but my products are. What would you suggest as next?
So you're not on Amazon, but your products are. So that will lead to the chaos that I described with the big group who had 42,000 sellers. The reality is, if you're a successful brand, if you fail to embrace Amazon early enough, then somebody else will sell your products ultimately. So you have to embrace Amazon at some point, because these 3P sellers, whether they're friendly or not so friendly, or grey sellers, unauthorized sellers, ultimately they will start dictating your whole retail ecosystem. So it's very important for you to actually embrace Amazon as early as possible and get in control of it, so you control the narrative around how you want to present your brand rather than some 3P seller.
Okay, thank you. We have one more question. It's just 3 p.m. now, but I'm hoping we can squeeze this one in. So after Amazon, what marketplaces would you suggest within the EU? Maybe that's a quick top line one that you can answer as well.
For sure. So, well, it depends on what category. And if you're in, again, I would sermonize that you should go to generic channels, because there tends to be far more volume of your category sellers, beauty buyers, who will be on the big generic channels. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, we can advise and support on that, and we'll do that for free. Whoever this person is that asked that question, we can absolutely help you with that. But what we try to do is you go where the consumer is. So frankly, there's not much point in trying to sell on Amazon in China, because it's all about Tmall. So we would say, embrace Tmall if you want to sell in China. If you want to go to Holland, then it's Bol. If you want to go to Poland, it's Allegro, as we said. And then also you have very fragmented geos, like France, for example. There's no one marketplace. There's like 30 marketplaces in France. So you need to think very carefully and create the right strategy and right approach for the channel that you want to go to. But ultimately it goes to a number of different things. So it's like, how aggressive do you want to be? What's the go-to-market strategy for the brand? What the price points? How ready are you for that particular market? So we would always say go where the consumer is and make sure you put your best foot forward with that particular channel, and obviously Pattern can help you with that.
Brilliant, thanks. And that's, I think, all the questions
Fantastic.
that we able to.
Fantastic. All right, we're slightly over time. I just want to say a massive thank you to Wizz. Some absolute brilliant pearls from you in terms of your knowledge and experience, which has been hugely helpful. And I once again, always super well informed, and really appreciate our expertise as well. As mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, it's been fully recorded. So everyone that signed up, we will shoot you the recording along with the deck after this. And of course, anyone who wants a scorecard for their own brand or brands, then we can do this territory by territory. So if you'd like one of them as well, for the area in which you operate, we can arrange that for free as well. So thank you so much, and have a great evening. If you're watching the football, let's make sure England win, and have a great evening.